Don't wash your hair.
So I won't have to wash every day anymore?
People's hair fell out from using it.
I don't know the science behind it, but
By the time you watch this, TikTok might not actually be around anymore. But that just means the misinformation's gone to Instagram or YouTube. So here is a new round of stuff that simply will not flush away. Hi, if you're new here, welcome. I'm Michelle. I'm a chemistry PhD, cosmetic chemist, and hair science nerd. Today we're going through videos that you all sent me. We'll be covering expensive versus cheap shampoos, how to wash your hair correctly, dry shampoo being worse than cigarettes, and so much more.
5 ultimate hair tips I wish I knew earlier so I didn't have to look like I was balding when I was 16. Number 1, brush your hair before you shower. If you're someone that's always like, OMG, why is there so much hair fallout after I shower? Girl, it's because you didn't brush the knots out of your hair first. Plus, all your hair products will soak in better.
First off, I love the energy in this. This tip kind of works for some people, but it won't really make you lose less hair. For hair like mine and hers, which is relatively straight, brushing your hair while it's dry is going to be less damaging. It's going to be easier to untangle. That's because when your hair is wet, it is going to be weaker, which makes it more prone to damage and breakage, especially if you end up yanking away at it. I'm going to need a prop from my book. So this is what it looks like when your hair is dry versus when it's wet. When it's dry, the cuticle scales, this is obviously very, very zoomed in. They're going to lie down quite flat along the surface of your hair. But when it's wet, water will actually enter into specific places. So the underside of each cuticle scale absorbs more water, and so that means that each cuticle scale ends up swelling up more on the underneath, and it pushes it up so they're sticking up away from their hair. And that means the bits that are sticking up, they're going to be more likely to chip off. If your hair is straight, it also sticks together more when it's wet. It's like when you have wet spaghetti and it clumps together because it tessellates well, or when, let's say you're in the shower and your straight-ish body starts touching a straight-ish wet shower curtain and it just starts sort of sticking to you and clinging to you more. So when that happens, that means that your straight hair is going to need more force to get the brush through and separate the wet strands. But on the flip side, if you have curly hair, that actually gets easier to untangle when it's wet. The curls get a bit looser in shape, so they end up straighter and they don't tangle as much, so you don't have to yank through your hair as hard. So even though your hair is still weaker, it also tessellates a bit less, it's just less sticky, less tangled, you end up using less force. Basically, it all comes down to how much force you need to untangle your hair, and if you're not sure if you should go dry or wet, then just try both and see which one actually makes you use less effort to untangle your hair. In both cases also, use conditioner. Adding conditioner will make a massive difference. Now the other part to this, why do you see so much more hair falling out if you don't brush it first? And that's just because a whole bunch of your hair is dead and ready to fall out at any time because your hair grows in a cycle. On average, we lose about 50 to 100 hairs a day. So if you're tugging on some of these hairs, even gently, so such as when you're brushing it, a whole bunch is going to fall out before you get into the shower. If you don't brush your hair, then the same stuff will just fall out in the shower while you're washing your hair. And washing your hair is usually a bit more energetic than just brushing your hair, which means that some of the hairs that are a bit less loose are going to come out as well. So brushing your hair before you shower doesn't really make a difference in terms of your hair thinning. It's just that if you don't brush, all of those loose hairs are coming out in the one place in the shower. And I think we also tend to notice hair in the shower more because you've got water sticking all the hair together into thicker clumps, plus your drain clogs up, and that's really annoying. I don't think brushing makes that much of a difference for whether your products soak in, although it is easier to spread out product through your hair if it's not tangled. But you can use wet product to help you detangle hair, and that was originally the reason conditioner was invented.
Number 2, let your conditioner sit. When you use conditioner in the shower, put your hair up into a claw clip or shower cap so you can do other shower tasks. Oh my god, my hair is like protruding out of the claw clip, but let her marinate and let her do her job.
This is a pretty good tip. Again, I think it's to do with spreading the product out, getting it between all your hair strands so that it is covering more of your individual hairs. It isn't really about it soaking into the middle of each strand because with standard conditioners, they mostly work on the surface. Hair masks are largely formulated just like hair conditioners. The only major difference is really that they are thicker and the instructions say to leave them on for longer.
Number 3, cold water at the end of your showers. Literally, I swear this makes my hair shiny. I don't know the science behind it, but I think it seals the hair cuticle. Does L'Oreal want to hire me for an ad?
This is such an old tip. I feel like I learned this when I was a teenager. I think I read it in like Dolly magazine or something, but that doesn't actually happen. So again, back to these cuticle scales, the main reason that they lift up is because you've got water soaking into them. If you have cold water, it's still soaking in, it's not going to make them go flat. Also, if you look at the surface of a hair, I mean, this obviously isn't 100% realistic, but there are so many gaps on the outside. It's kind of like a pine cone. Even if they sit down, there are tons of gaps. It's not really sealing anything in. Now, her hair is really lovely and shiny, and some of that is definitely because of her routine, but she does also have a whole bunch of natural advantages. So first off, her hair is black, which means that when her hair reflects light, that contrast between the light and the black, that's going to be bigger and it'll look shinier than if it was like a lighter color. Her hair is also straight, so whether hair looks shiny is about whether it's aligned, whether you have lots of parallel hair strands reflecting light all together, and straight hair just tessellates better. And the third thing, she is also pretty young, I would say, I don't know, early 20s maybe, but when you get older, stuff in your body just all starts getting a bit messed up. There's a really interesting study that looked at what happened to Japanese women's hair as they got older. Each strand just gets less uniform, a lot of it is rougher. If you had straight hair before, you end up with a lot of what they say meandering strands. I'm almost 40 and I've definitely noticed a massive change in how my hair behaves, and I think I'm probably still in denial about having to start treating it like wavy hair. I don't know, maybe I will just get one of those Asian auntie bobs.
Number 4, use heat protectant. Guys, please stop drying or curling your hair without protectant. Like, don't you put oil on a pan when you cook to protect your food from burning? So if you don't want crispy, crunchy hair, make sure to use protectant.
That's good advice. Heat protectants, they work in theory by putting a layer on your hair that helps spread out heat. That way you don't end up with really hot spots while you have other spots in your hair that are too cold to actually end up with that style. That layer also can help condition so that your hair doesn't get snagged in hot tools. Yes, I have seen the heat protectants receipt testing videos, and I am working on a longer video about that because everything that was happening in that was actually harder to work out than I expected. There are still a few little things that I'm trying to figure out. You can't see this, but I am actually surrounded by like a whole bunch of receipts. This is nowhere near all of them. I've been doing a whole bunch of experiments. It is a process, so stay tuned for that.
Number 5, put those hands down and stop picking your scalp. I know you want to pick that scalp, girl, but you need to stop. Go get some slime or something. Because you're probably spreading oil from your scalp to the rest of your hair, making it look more dirty and oily. Now you'll never have a bad hair day. You're welcome. So
I feel like I have to defend scalp oil a little bit here, which is unusual for me. If you have a lot of oil, then it does tend to stick to dust more than hair products would, and that's kind of what she's saying, but it isn't all bad. One of the reasons that your hair changes when you hit menopause is because you're producing less scalp oil, and there are some people with oily hair who really like this, but most people, they find that their hair goes really dry and frizzy. There are also some natural hair care techniques where you mostly just use your natural scalp oil as conditioner, and some people can get really gorgeous hair that way. So scalp oil does work as a conditioner, but at the same time, you can also use modern products with oily ingredients that do the same thing. It's really a personal choice. Using modern products usually is a lot less effort. Also, on the scalp picking thing, I have trichotillomania, which is related to this. It's a hair pulling disorder, and it was really bad when I was a kid, so I have always just had a little crop of warped hairs that are just, a bit traumatized, and I think that adds to the lack of alignment. In itself, it's not really a huge problem for me, but it is probably linked to my ADHD, and this sort of compulsive behavior can be linked to lots of other conditions. So if it is a problem for you, then you might want to consider getting that checked out.
Yes, this brand has lawsuits you can look up online. People's hair fell out from using it. Here are 3 red flag ingredients in your shampoo. I'm a hairstylist.
Hairdressers really love demonizing cheap brands. I feel like it isn't just because they sell salon brands, but a lot of the time, hairdresser education actually comes from courses run by salon brands. And so they learn a lot of stuff about how drugstore shampoos are just evil and terrible for your hair. But there's a whole bunch of problems here. First off, lawsuits are not science. The wrong side wins lawsuits all the time. And this isn't even about people winning the lawsuit. This is just about there being lawsuits existing. So that simply doesn't mean anything. But there's been so many hair loss lawsuits in the last few years, and these drugstore product formulas haven't really changed that much. The ingredients are largely the same. So the best explanation, I think, is actually COVID. Pretty much everyone's had COVID at least once, and since very early on in the pandemic, it's been linked to hair loss. I'm sorry, I have to keep referring back to my book, The Science of Beauty, because the diagrams in it are actually really useful. There's a type of hair loss called telogen effluvium. Hair grows in a cycle. We've got the first phase, which is growth, anagen. Then we have catagen, which is where the bulb dies off. and then telogen is where the bulb is pretty much at rest. This hair is about to fall out. Normally on your head, most of your hair is in the anagen phase, and then you've got a bit of telogen and catagen. But if you go through a physically stressful event like severe illness, then a whole bunch of your anagen hairs will just prematurely go into the dormant phase. So your hair ends up dying and falling out, and this happens usually 2 to 3 months after the sickness. So people don't necessarily make the link and they think that it's actually the product they're using. They'll stop using the product, and then telogen effluvium, it naturally recovers after about 6 months. So your hairs go back to the anagen phase. And so when that happens, then people think, oh, well, I stopped using the product because I thought it was the product. It must have been the product if my hair is recovering.
Number 1, mineral oil. It's probably the cheapest ingredient you can get on the planet. It's not going to make your hair or skin feel good at all. Basically just a filler ingredient that does nothing for you.
Okay, first off, cheap is not bad. I really hate this because a lot of the time cheap actually means it uses less resources to make, and that is a good thing. Most of the time it means it's actually more environmentally sustainable. So mineral oil is a byproduct of petroleum extraction, and that is extracted for energy. So until our world stops using fossil fuels, there will be this very cheap byproduct that didn't actually need a lot of extra energy to produce. Farming also has a whole bunch of other impacts. I did a whole video about sustainability myths with Jen of the Eco Well. She's doing her PhD in environmental misinformation. And mineral oil does actually have benefits compared to plant oils. It's a lot more stable, it has no double bonds, so that means it's less likely to go rancid, there's a lot less waste. But most importantly, the oils she's highlighted in this clip, they are not mineral oils, they are actually plant oils. They are olive oil and camellia oil. Like, this is very, you can't stop me because I can't read. Also, this is the Tresemme botanical range. It's literally the range that they made to cater to people who were complaining about mineral oil. Like, that label there, that says 0% mineral oil. Like, it is right there. I really hate this sort of marketing that brands have started doing to try to, I don't know, concede to pseudoscience. And I think this is like the perfect demonstration. You just should not negotiate with terrorists, especially if they can't read, or maybe they just refuse to read.
Second one, having water as your top ingredient. Some things do need water, yes, to perform, but this is so watered down. You're basically just buying water. Don't do it.
Water is the first ingredient for like 99% of the shampoos out there. Like, having water as the first ingredient does not tell you anything. I guarantee that most of the shampoos she's recommending have water as the first ingredient. Like, you cannot tell if it's watered down just from having water as the first thing there. It's always some really high percentage. It's literally just how shampoos work.
Number 3, sulfates. It's not that all sulfates are bad, but these sulfates are such low quality, they're just gonna strip your hair of all its oils, color, everything you need it to do. It's gonna be gone. Don't do it.
Okay, so it's watered down, but it's also so powerful it's going to strip your hair of everything. Like, this makes zero sense. It is purely just vibes. I'm also really confused about this whole low quality sulfate thing. I do see hairdressers say this a lot, like drugstore products have low quality ingredients. It used to be that they claimed that they use different ingredients, but I think they realized that people can actually read, they can just compare the ingredient list and they'll see that they are the same ingredients. And this just isn't true. Salon and drugstore products are all formulated by cosmetic formulators and cosmetic chemists. We are not taught to formulate them differently. There aren't like special types or qualities of ingredients that you can only use in professional products and you cannot put them in drugstore products, except if you've got like patented ingredients like Olaplex or K18. Otherwise, with all of these like normal products, the ingredients are the same. There's like no special big, thick legal barrier. People who have formulated both types of products say there's no difference, like Perry Romanovsky of the Beauty Brains, and studies over the years haven't found any consistent differences. And it's extra weird that she is saying Tresemme of all the brands is just going to strip the crap out of your hair, because Good Housekeeping did a test and they found that a sulfate-containing shampoo was the one that stripped dye the least, and it was a Tresemme shampoo. It actually worked better than sulfate-free shampoos, including ones from salon brands, because it's actually about the overall formulation, not individual ingredients. The way shampoos work is through surfactants. They are the cleaning ingredients. They are the pink tadpoles that I'm going to put in this diagram. And the way they work is through a supramolecular process, which is really cool. It's sort of like teamwork between molecules. My PhD was partly in supramolecular chemistry. It isn't about the individual ingredients like if you just see sulfates, it's about the mixture of ingredients, the ratio of the different ones. It's sort of like Let's say you have a soccer team. I don't really know sports, but I think this analogy works. If you have a bunch of good soccer players who work really well together as a team, they can beat a team that has a bunch of superstar players, but they just don't know how to work together. There are lots of drugstore products that are made by huge companies who have multiple labs around the world. They're dedicated to formulating and really testing their products. So these companies are not going to be putting claims on the bottle that they can't somewhat substantiate. Big brands have lots of lawyers checking over their claims because they know that people might sue them for misleading advertising. Like, there are just a lot more people looking at their products. So if you're buying a product from them that says nourishing and replenishing, it's not going to be stripping. If you buy something that's clarifying, then yes, but this is not going to happen.
So if you want long, full-bodied, vibrant, really vital-looking, beautiful hair, but there's one thing that you can do that will actually give you all of those things, and that's don't wash your hair.
I get sent a whole bunch of doctors saying dodgy stuff, so they come up a lot in these videos, and it isn't like if you took a doctor and a regular person, the doctor would be getting things wrong more. But people take what doctors say more seriously because you would expect them to know better. It is authority bias. We tend to believe people who seem to be experts. He's wearing scrubs and he's filming inside his clinic, and I looked him up. He's a cosmetic surgeon. But it doesn't seem like he actually does anything to do with hair. There is no real reason to take what he's taking more seriously than anyone else, especially since more qualified people, we're talking dermatologists, trichologists, even hairdressers, they've all said that you can wash your hair and that is fine. I think looking up someone's qualifications before you start believing their advice, that is one really good basic step to take. A lot of the time, people with doctor on their profile, they turn out to be chiropractors or naturopaths. They are not science-based practitioners. And it's not like you need to be an expert to have a valid opinion on something like how to get nice hair, but authority bias is really powerful. I think that if you are going to wear your scrubs and start saying stuff, you do have a responsibility to double check your info more carefully because people are going to be more likely to believe you.
When you wash your hair with soap, with any kind of soap, I don't care if it's natural, non-natural, anything you buy, shampoo, all of those soaps are detergents and they strip all of that vitality from your hair and dry it. So if you want the natural oils from your scalp to permeate into your hair, which is going to make it look beautiful, don't wash it.
What he's saying here is really not that different from any other influencer who says don't wash your hair, it's unnatural, natural is good, which is not true. I don't really know what he means by vitality because hair is dead. Again, there are ways of looking after your hair with natural sebum. Sebum is the oil, it soaks into your hair, makes it more flexible. It can act as a conditioner. But you can do the same things with oily ingredients in conditioners, and that is actually a lot easier because they are specifically designed to make it easier. And the big downside to never washing your hair is that hair oil is really good food for Malassezia yeast. This is something that's naturally on your scalp, but when it overgrows, you can end up with things like dandruff, itching, and flaking. And that sort of general inflammation can actually increase hair loss. There are also a lot of other factors like genetics and climate, so there are some people who can just never wash and that will be fine. But there are also a lot of people who cannot do that, and not washing will make their hair so much worse. If your hair is feeling stripped and dry after you've washed it, chances are you're just not using the right products. There are so many products out there designed for different hair types. Maybe look for something that says hydrating or nourishing or replenishing.
I have really oily hair. I know it's bad, but I have to wash it like every day. Are you using a professional shampoo? Professional shampoo gets your hair much cleaner, so it takes a lot longer before your hair gets oily again. So I won't have to wash every day anymore? Exactly. And also, have you tried washing your hair twice? When your hair gets oily really quickly, it's usually because it wasn't all the way clean in the first place. If you don't get lots of suds and lather on the first wash, your hair is not clean yet. You need to do a second wash, and then you should get tons of suds, tons of lather. That's your sign that your hair is clean. But my Pantene suds on the first time, every time. Right, that's why this only goes for professional shampoos. Cheap shampoos will suds and lather no matter what without getting your hair clean.
This is Blowout Professor. He gives a lot of tips on things like how to wash your hair properly, and those techniques work well for lots of people. But I've been asked about his explanations for drugstore versus professional shampoos a lot. This clip is a few years old, but I think this is still his stance. The first thing is, if your hair is getting oily quickly, maybe sometimes it is because you haven't washed it properly, and he does have good techniques for that, but a lot of the time it's actually just because of genetics. How much oil we put out is mostly internal. It's up to things like genetics and hormones. So some people are just oilier than others. It's also to do with climate, what sorts of activities you're doing, if you're exercising a lot. I don't think this blanket statement really works for everyone. This is a pretty common thing. We saw this before with the other hairdresser, this idea that professional salon hair care is just completely different from drugstore hair care. Again, this just is not a thing, and it is definitely not to the point where drugstore hair care is engineered to lather on the first wash every time and professional shampoo is not. I'm not sure you can actually engineer it that way because there's just so much difference in the level of oil and how different people shampoo out there, but also there just isn't this level of coordination between all of the professional shampoo brands and then all of the drugstore brands to just, agree to have their products work like that. Again, cosmetic formulators aren't taught to formulate them differently, they don't contain different ingredients, and a lot of the time they are owned by umbrella companies, so he recommends a lot of Redken, which is owned by L'Oreal. L'Oreal also make a bunch of other professional brands as well as a whole bunch of drugstore brands, and a lot of the technologies that they use in the professional ones are also found in their more budget-friendly ranges like L'Oreal and Garnier. This myth reminds me a lot of the myth about medical grade skincare versus drugstore or OTC skincare. OTC, they're not really OTC, but this is something in skincare that a lot of estheticians say. And I think it comes from a pretty similar place. It's also brand educators, but also the fact that hairdressers are a lot more familiar with the professional brands that they stock. I found that in general, hairdressers tend to know what works best in their experience, in their salons, using the brands that they're familiar with. But their explanations for the science about why is kind of hit and miss. This isn't that surprising because hair science is pretty bloody complicated. It has taken me a really long time to understand it before getting to the point where I felt like I could actually make videos about it. And I think with hairdressers, there is a lot of bias in their experience that they might not even notice. For example, I would guess that he has used every Redken product many, many times. He really knows the whole range. But I don't think he's probably genuinely gone into trying out every single Pantene product, for example. Maybe if he did, and he went into it without any bias, he might realize that they're not that different. I've also seen hairdressers say that every time they have a client who has really bad hair, lots of buildup, they'll ask what they're using and it will be drugstore products. But then with their clients who use nice products, the ones that they recommend, their hair is nice. And I think what they're observing is true, but the explanation is actually different. So if you have someone who tried a professional product and it didn't work, they would probably go off and buy a drugstore product because why would they pay so much more for something that didn't work the first time? So by default, the vast majority of people who haven't found the right products for their hair, they are going to be using drugstore products. Plus, if you go to a hairdresser and they recommend you a whole bunch of really pricey products that didn't work, you're probably less likely to go back. And I mean, I have done this before. I've tried out a whole bunch of drugstore and professional products. I've found products that work well from both categories, and most people I've talked to who have tried both types, they've said the same thing.
Washing your hair the wrong way from a dermatologist. Because there's a scientific right way to wash your hair. Dr. Charles, I'm a board certified dermatologist, and you've already seen me change your skincare by teaching you how to properly wash your face. The skin on your scalp is some of the thickest on the body. And if you're using an expensive shampoo, a medicated shampoo, a shampoo with an active in there, you need to give it at least 3 to 5 minutes.
This is Dr. Charles. He is kind of famous for how much incorrect stuff he posts. I scrolled through his profile once and I think I gave up counting after 15 videos that were complete BS. I don't think people realize that I am actually not a very confrontational person in real life. I only respond to maybe 1 in 10, 1 in 20 videos that I come across. Yes, he is a real dermatologist. He is board certified, and dermatologists are the medical experts when it comes to treating hair and skin medical conditions. So I feel like I always maybe come across as dissing dermatologists, and I don't want to come across that way because I do respect dermatologists and what they do. What they do is really hard, but this kind of thing is not what they do. They don't know that much about formulations and how non-medical cosmetic products work. What you see on social media from big dermfluencers, things like skincare tips, how to wash your face, how to wash your hair, that is not actual dermatology. Like, real dermatology is diagnosing and treating something like over 3,000 different diseases. Dermatologists can just look at what's on your skin or what's on your mucous membranes and work out what is wrong with you. Like, that level of training to do that, it's like 12 years. It is really, really hard. With things like formulation, in standard dermatology, that is like maybe an hour, if that. It is a couple of pages maximum in dermatology textbooks. Even with cosmetic dermatology, which is a lot more about skin appearance and aesthetics, the amount of information on how formulations work is still really limited. And a lot of the time, there are little inaccuracies about things like this in dermatology textbooks because, again, it's not real dermatology, it's dermatology adjacent. And most dermatologists I've talked to, they wouldn't double down on this kind of thing if they've been corrected because they know this is not really part of their expertise. But Dr. Charles is built different. One time he said you couldn't put glycolic acid on wet skin and he got debunked by like 5 different chemists in 5 different ways and he just kept doubling down. I think he ended up blocking all of us and James Welsh has a video on that. He also got into a thing with Dr. Mike where he ended up blocking him and everyone around him, including his dog. Dr. Mike has a video on that, and Dr. Charles ended up posting an apology, and he unblocked Dr. Mike, but he hasn't unblocked me or any of the chemists as far as I know. So back to the specific things he's saying here.
The skin on your scalp is some of the thickest on the body. And if you're using an expensive shampoo, a medicated shampoo, a shampoo with an active in there, you need to give it at least 3 to 5 minutes. Yes, 3 to 5 minutes for it to actually reach max efficacy. And if you haven't been showered for 3 to 5 minutes, it's probably the reason why your dandruff is not under control and your scalp is oily and your hair is breaking.
So 2 things. The thickness of your skin has nothing to do with how long you need to leave something on for, and whether or not you need to leave something on for longer depends entirely on the formula. He shows this study on screen, the effect of residence time on the efficacy of anti-dandruff shampoos, but it's not really relevant to the shampoos that we have on the market now. It was only done on 2 shampoos 20 years ago. For example, with Head & Shoulders, who developed a lot of anti-dandruff shampoo technology, their scientists have said that leaving their shampoos on for longer probably won't make that much of a difference. So if you actually want a bigger effect, what you should do is shampoo twice. That's because the way that their shampoos work is mostly through coacervates. These are kind of like microscopic bubbles with the active stuck inside. When you rinse and dilute your shampoo with water, those bubbles kind of pop and the actives can come out and stick onto your hair and scalp. If you leave their shampoos on for longer, then you're probably just going to waste time and water and energy, and maybe even irritate your scalp for no real benefit. And there are shampoos that will work better if you leave them on for longer. But the best way to tell is not just follow this blanket 3 to 5 minute rule, it's to just read the instructions and follow them. This is one of the reasons I don't think people should just go off and read studies and start doing things based on them. Unless you know the background of an area, like the overall context, you can't really work out what's going on, if shampoos have changed over the last 20 years, if what they've said actually is still relevant.
So one thing I would never do as a doctor is use dry shampoo. Most dry shampoo that you buy has the equivalent of 10 cigarettes in terms of benzene. Benzene is a known human carcinogen and it's been shown to cause leukemia.
This is the most annoying type of content I see from doctors, the idea that some everyday product is giving you cancer. And I mean, we see this all the time, but when a doctor is saying it, people are going to take it way more seriously because you would think they know what they're talking about. I got sent this reel a whole bunch. People were really freaking out. I had journalists emailing me, asking me if I could get on the phone as soon as possible. It was a massive mess. This might be surprising, but medical doctors are not experts in everything to do with health. The safety of consumer products is just not part of their training. I guarantee you that no doctor on earth has ever had a patient with leukemia from dry shampoo. That is just not how it works. The experts on this are toxicologists who work in safety assessment. It is their job to work out the safe levels of different ingredients and products, and if there's some sort of new issue that arises, they investigate it. From talking to a lot of doctors, like the dermatologist from the Huberman skincare episode, as well as this guy, they just don't seem to realize that safety assessors exist, and a lot of people don't realize either, so this is me shouting them out. Thank you to safety assessors. Mo Skin Lab is a toxicologist and safety assessor. He's on YouTube and Instagram. He is the best person to go to if you see that, candles or receipts are killing you. This guy blocked him. Now with benzene, yes, there were recalls of dry shampoo and lots of other products because there was benzene in them. It was a small amount of contamination, but the amounts were so small that they weren't much of a risk. Anytime you see something scary about benzene, it is probably information from Valisure. They are an independent testing lab and they have a bit of a history, in my opinion, of just really stretching the truth and making things sound way scarier than they actually are. I've got a video that goes really deep into them. Highly recommend that video, I think it's some of my best work. Some context that's missing from this reel: 1, we already inhale a lot of benzene. Benzene is in tons of stuff, like petrol, the gas you use for cooking, and the amounts from products are the same as those or much less. Number 2, for most of these products, the only benzene concentrations we know come from Valisure, and they just do not seem to be that good at measuring things. And again, with their track record, they usually report higher, scarier concentrations than anyone else. I'm not really sure how she got this 10 cigarettes thing, so if we take the amounts from this compound chem chart, we have 46 to 272 micrograms of benzene per cigarette. According to Valisure, they say that 70% of dry shampoo had over 0.18 parts per million of benzene. So this converts to 180 micrograms per kilo of dry shampoo, and from these numbers, we have mostly like 7-ounce cans, roughly 0.2 kilograms. So that gives me about 36 micrograms per can, which is not 10 of these. Even if we go up to 2 parts per million, which was not the case for most, it was like 1 out of 5 cans, then that would be about 10 times as much. You'd have roughly, very roughly, 400-ish micrograms per can, and that is still not quite 10 cigarettes worth. So not really sure how that happened. And this comparison isn't really honest in the first place because you have a whole can of dry shampoo. It takes you months to get through that. Plus, when you're using dry shampoo, you're not inhaling all of it into your lungs unless your lungs really need to be dry shampooed. For comparison, we actually breathe about 60 micrograms of benzene a day if you live in the city, so that is actually more than 1 cigarette's worth, and that's because cigarettes are scary, but benzene is not the main scary thing about cigarettes. Benzene specifically causes blood cancers like leukemia, but smokers have less than double the risk of leukemia compared to other people, and I mean, that's not great, but compared to other cancers, I mean, smokers have somewhere like 10 times the risk of lung cancer, which of course depends on how many cigarettes you're actually smoking a day. This is for like 10 to 20 cigarettes a day.
You can find dry shampoos that don't have benzene. You can look on the Valisure website to see if your dry shampoo is listed there as containing high levels of benzene.
I guess that's not the worst advice if you trust Valisure's numbers. It does depend on the batch, but also if your product's not on there, then that just doesn't mean that much. There's a Wall Street Journal article on how Unilever are getting sued over benzene in their dry shampoos. In their court filing, it says that Valisure sent Unilever a proposed agreement. If Unilever would pay Valisure $1.25 million up front, plus $250,000 a month over the term of the agreement, Valisure would keep its Unilever testing information confidential. So there are probably a whole bunch of brands that were left off Valisure's list because they paid up. Like, Valisure are independent, but that doesn't mean you should trust them. That was originally posted about a year ago, but then a few weeks back she posted this.
I'm a board-certified dermatologist, and here are 3 things that I would never use inside in a poorly ventilated area.
She mentions dry shampoo, spray sunscreens, and deodorant all because of benzene, and since those original Valisure reports, there's actually been a study that found that people who used more sunscreen had lower levels of benzene in their blood, so the opposite of what you would expect if benzene was a real problem. This was published in a dermatology journal in 2022, so I don't think she is incapable of finding this info. From what I've heard, she is a very good dermatology surgeon, which just makes this so much more frustrating. When I first posted about her, I got a bit of pushback from medical doctors. They said I was making people trust doctors less. I just should never criticize doctors. But at the moment on social media, people should not just blindly trust what doctors are saying, because there are a lot of doctors posting stuff outside of their expertise that is just straight up BS. And some of the stuff they're posting about is way more harmful than just use a different dry shampoo. This dermatologist and Dr. Shirin Idris both posted about using cypress oil as an alternative to laser hair removal, and this was just based on one crappy study. Mo and I both posted about how it's a possible endocrine disruptor. It supposedly works by being anti-androgenic, so it is meant to mess with your hormones so that you don't grow hair. If it's doing that, it is probably doing that deeper in your body as well. And Mo even did a quick toxicology assessment. He confirmed that it was a real risk. I don't think it would actually be responsible if we shut up about this kind of thing, and I mean, why are we blaming the people who are trying to stop people from getting hurt? Like, we're sticking our necks out for this? Surely we should be blaming the people who are just making clickbait content. And corrections never get as many views, like our post warning people were not getting anywhere near as many views as the original ones recommending cypress oil. People are not actually debunking doctors enough. So if you want me to shut up, here is how. First off, medical doctors could just double check their content before they post, just be a bit more responsible about how seriously people take their word. They could ask a more relevant expert, they could even DM me, like I am more than happy to look over their stuff, I've done this before for other dermatologists. Doctors could also just correct each other, that way it doesn't look like all the doctors are, in collusion, they're all trying to protect each other. When I was talking about rosemary oil, it was actually really nice to be able to point to dermatologists who didn't recommend rosemary oil. And doctors just have an easy time getting through. Like, I have had so many doctors delete my comments on their posts, completely just leave my DMs on red, or straight up block me. I mean, Dr. Charles actually did something after Dr. Mike called him out. He ignored like 5 scientists and he still has us blocked. Doctors could also just correct themselves. Like, if someone leaves a comment saying that what you said was incorrect, you could, look into it, correct your caption. Maybe you could even post an update that has the right info. I've corrected myself before. I think we should really do this more often and just normalize it. I just find it such a pity that we can't trust things anymore. Like, we should be able to trust medical doctors from good universities. She is from Harvard. There is another Harvard dermatology surgeon who also posts a whole bunch of junk. And the time I stitched her viral post about nail lamps causing cancer, she blocked me, and then her husband, who is also a Harvard dermatologist, he started attacking me in my comments instead of attacking what I was actually saying. He just kept saying that I had no qualifications, and he did this under his full government name. I feel like that is going to be a big story for some other time. Dr. Charles also has Harvard in his bio. I mean, what is going on at Harvard? So I think we really need to adjust our parameters for critical thinking. So if someone keeps mentioning their qualification and it isn't actually relevant to the topic, that is a distraction and a red flag. It's not like a certain sign that you can't trust them, but it should put you on alert. Another useful sign is if they have a bad track record. If you look through their other content and there's just a whole bunch of stuff that you know is BS, like rosemary oil being good for hair loss. Both of these derms have posted this. Think about whether their reasoning makes sense and check the data that they're showing. So if you know how to do the calculations, you can try doing them. If you don't, or if you just want a shortcut, you can just check what more relevant experts are saying. So just start Googling, Google Valisure, benzene, dry shampoo, sunscreen. If you dig deep enough, you should be able to find my post on the topic, that sunscreen study, that Wall Street Journal article, and that will give you a good idea of whether or not to trust them.
So what should you do if you're a swimmer or get into contaminated water every day? This is gonna sound absolutely crazy. I can't even believe these words are coming out of my mouth. But you need to use shampoo every single day, or at least every time you get into chlorinated or contaminated water. Now, obviously, if you use any of these shampoos up on that list, you're cooked. Your hair is more than likely to get more damage from the shampoo than from the chlorine itself. What you should do instead is find a natural shampoo that does not use any sulfates or parabens.
This guy has a whole bunch of videos where he's talking about how damaging normal shampoos are for your hair, and I hear a lot about this, like the idea that sulfates and parabens will damage or strip hair, but that is just not how shampoos work. I've already talked about sulfates, but I think it's good to remember that it is always about the overall formulation. Shampoos are designed to be used on hair. The companies formulating them are not stupid. They have access to all of the information guys like this have, as well as a whole bunch more on top of that, like they can physically test their own shampoos. I know there is this whole conspiracy thing where people say companies are purposely damaging your hair so that you buy more products, but notice that the people who are saying this are usually trying to sell you something that most of the time is A, more expensive, B, made by a smaller brand who doesn't invest as much money into research and development, and C, they don't actually make your hair feel as nice. Usually they'll say something like, sure, your hair might feel nice now, but it is causing long-term damage, or it's just coating the surface, it's not really nourishing your hair. Sometimes there is a grain of truth to that. Sometimes products that start off feeling really nice do end up being too conditioning over time. But most of the time, it's just that the smaller brand can't compete on performance. They need to find some other competitive advantage, and the best way to do that is to start a conspiracy.
Native is a great example. They're silicone-free, paraben-free, and sulfate-free.
I find this parabens thing really weird because parabens, they're used in shampoos in super low amounts. Like, they are just not going to have a big effect on the overall structure of your hair. They're not going to damage it or anything. The only thing they would do is make your products last longer because they kill microbes.
And also, as always, Base Body Works is the best natural shampoo on the market right now. I mean, come on, you can just look at the ingredients list and tell.
I'm qualified as a cosmetic chemist, and I would actually say, based on this ingredient list, avoid this because it has water and no preservatives. Like, that is just such a big red flag. Either this product would have already gone off by the time you get it, or they messed up the ingredient list. Like, neither of these is a good outcome. Cocamidopropylbutane also isn't natural, so that is also really sus. This whole natural thing is just really ironic for hair because the worst surfactant for your hair, hands down, is soap, which is the most natural surfactant. All these unnatural synthetic surfactants, the reason they were invented is to get around a whole bunch of problems that soap has. The biggest problem with soap is that if you have hard water, you end up with soap scum. If you've seen the scum on your bathroom taps or on your walls, that was what was happening to people's hair. It's actually really hard to get off your hair, and if you've heard of this hack where you can rinse your hair with vinegar and that's meant to make your hair shinier, this is actually the origin. This hack doesn't really work anymore because we have unnatural surfactants that don't do this, but back in the day, people were basically using DIY house cleaning hacks just to undo this effect of soap, and that is going to be so much more damaging than the shampoos he was showing.
Why is the conditioner in a box dye so much better than the conditioner that you're buying off the shelves? Well, don't worry. Me and my husband went to the old Wally World and we figured it out. I went first over to the hair dye aisle where all the box dyes were, and I flipped over all the boxes and I read what the ingredients for their conditioners. And I kept coming across this. I'm going to butcher this word. Amidamethicone. It's this, it's spelled like this. And
Nina Paul does a lot of dupe videos, and a lot of the time finding dupes like this just by comparing ingredient lists doesn't entirely work. But this isn't a bad starting point. Amidamethicone is actually one of my favorite hair care ingredients. I actually posted about it in 2019. I discovered it when I was bleaching my hair and it was getting all like stretchy and floppy and just really prone to damage. The reason it's so good for super damaged hair is because amidamethicone has a positive charge. So when your hair is really damaged, it loses the natural conditioning layer, which is oily. That means that oily ingredients don't really stick to your hair anymore. Amidamethicone gets around this by having a charge, and it makes sense for box dyes because you are bleaching your hair a bit when you're using box dyes. Amidamethicone can also form a film around your hair that helps seal in the color for a bit longer, so again, really good for box dyes.
like, oh, that must be a common ingredient in conditioners. Wrong! We go over to the hair care aisle where all these conditioners are, and we checked every single brand. And this is the only brand that we were able to find with this common ingredient.
I've actually found quite a lot of products with amidamethicone. I listed a whole bunch of my favorites in my amidamethicone video, but here is a picture of some of them. The easiest way to search for products with a particular ingredient, I think, is just to use the website. So you go on Google, you go site, website name, and then amidamethicone. This doesn't work with all websites. Like in Australia, the Priceline site doesn't work, but Chemist Warehouse and Adore Beauty work. In the US, Ulta and Target sites work. Again, just comparing ingredient lists doesn't always give you products that work exactly as well, but I think it's not a bad starting point for looking for cheap alternatives. But just a word of warning, sometimes there are recommendations online that aren't safe. Nina did recommend cypress oil as an alternative to laser hair removal. That video got millions of views, and some people told me that they commented about the safety issues. Their comments got deleted. Congratulations if you made it this far. I am really proud of you. I am proud of us. I hope you enjoyed this journey together, even if there was a lot of pain involved. Please like and subscribe. Please keep sending me videos. I can't respond to all of my messages, but it does really help me keep track of what is trending. Be careful of who you listen to online. Don't just trust people. Don't even just trust me. Double check everything. If you want more hair care science, check out the videos popping up around me.